This is a video about clauses and how they function in sentences. So let's look at a sentence first. Here's one. This sentence, you'll notice, has a subject and a verb, and it also has an object. But let's just talk about this part first, the subject and the verb together. Whenever you have a subject and a verb together, generally you have a clause. A clause is a unit of language that we use to build a sentence, and it's a complete idea. And clauses need to have a subject and a verb. Now this clause also has an object. This entire sentence is the clause, but it's not necessary to always have an object. This type of clause is known as an independent clause. Independent clauses stand alone. They're independent. We also call them main clauses. If you look at all of these clauses here, they are independent, and you'll see each one has a subject and a verb, or a verb phrase. And they all have objects except for the third one, Coraline fell. That is also a clause. It's not necessary to have an object. It's still a complete idea, and it is an independent idea. It's an independent clause. When a sentence is comprised of one independent clause, it's what's known as a simple sentence. So simple sentences are sentences that have one independent clause. Let's move these over here, and I'm going to put 4 more independent clauses on this side. And you'll notice that the pairs that we have related information. So in the first one, the first pair, he's eating all the food and he's drinking all the water. We can connect these with a word like and. And is a coordinating conjunction, and we use them to connect independent clauses. So let's connect these two. Now I have a sentence that has 2 independent clauses, and they are connected together by the word and, which again is called a coordinating conjunction. This type of sentence is known as a compound sentence. So we have simple sentences which are just one independent clause. And we have compound sentences which are 2 independent clauses joined together by a coordinating conjunction. Now in this first example, the subject is the same in both, he. But that's not necessary, like in the second example. Let's join those together with another coordinating conjunction, but, and I have different subjects, and that's okay. The information is still related, though. And so with the word but, I'm presenting a contrast or a concession to the idea. And again, it's a compound sentence, 2 independent clauses connected together. There are other words in English we use to connect ideas, but not sentences. I can use a word like however. This word does not create a compound sentence, though. I still have 2 separate simple sentences. They are not connected grammatically, but the idea is connected using the word however. So you don't have to use a coordinating conjunction. You don't have to create compound sentences. We have lots of different ways to do that in English. In the last one, I'm going to use the coordinating conjunction or. Those 3 are pretty much the only coordinating conjunctions we use to make compound sentences, and, but, and, or. Okay, I'd like to talk about another type of clause, the dependent clause. We also call these subordinate clauses. Now, just like independent clauses, they have a subject and a verb, and they may or may not have objects. This one has a complement. But what makes them different is they cannot stand alone. You look at this and you realize it makes no sense at all without some sort of context. That's what makes it dependent. It requires another clause in order to make sense. So here are 4 examples of dependent clauses. They're not complete sentences. They need an independent clause in order to make sense. So let's add an independent clause to the first one. So now this is a complete sentence. We have connected it with this word, because. Now this is also a conjunction, but it's called a subordinating conjunction, not a coordinating conjunction. And that's the word at the head of the dependent clause, which connects it to the independent clause. And when I have a sentence that is formed with one independent clause connected to a dependent clause, we have what's called a complex sentence. So we have simple sentences, compound sentences, and now complex sentences. This one uses the word because, and so this is a dependent clause of reason. It expresses the reason why something is happening. There are many different types of dependent clauses. The second one is another example. This one expresses a concession to the idea in the independent clause. Here we have what's known as a time clause. It tells us exactly when Coraline fell. Now the last one is a special case. This is called a relative clause, and that's not a conjunction, that's a pronoun, the word that. It connects the idea. And I have a different video about relative clauses which you should watch. It's certainly an important part of our curriculum. Now, on the right we have our dependent clauses, and on the left we have our independent clauses, but that's not the only way to make these sentences. We can do a switch like this and put the dependent clause first and the independent clause second, except for relative clauses. The fourth example, that can't be said. The dependent clause, the relative clause, must come second, after. Just a final note, when I make this switch, when the dependent clause comes first, generally we need a little punctuation there. Don't forget your comma.